Let's continue on our discussion of IT governance, and let's talk about outsourcing. Most larger organizations outsource to some degree or another. We've all known what it's like to get telemarketing calls or support calls or collections calls from an outsourced vendor, especially one that's offshore, so that the company can have like a 24-hour shop. And so people at night, when it's night here and people are sleeping here, there's another shop fully operational on the other side of the world. When you outsource or you hire vendors, which almost everybody's going to do some way or another, there's got to be some management of that as well. And that vendor or outsourcer management, they're going to communicate with the vendors and the outsourcers. They're going to manage the relationship, make sure we have the level of support that we need, communicate issues and project-related issues, and we're going to provide the service level reports to management, upper management, and we're going to review the contracts. In our infrastructure and operations and maintenance, we'll have an operations manager who is responsible for computer operations, personnel and security of the computer room. Larger organizations will break out these roles like this. Smaller organizations, you might wear many, many hats. But in a larger organization, you might have just an operations manager for the computer room, computer operations, computer security. And then you'll have a control group, and they're responsible for actually doing the input and output of the data for the user community. You might have someone who manages just the media. They're the tape librarian, and all the backups go to them. And they don't themselves do any backups or restore anything, but they're the custodian of the tapes or the media or the sources or the source code or the source disks for applications and operating systems. And they'll be responsible for all the removable media, for recording it, storing it, issuing it, documenting it, maintaining it. You'll also have data entry. Realize not all data entry is someone sitting there actually typing. You can have much more automated data entry, like point of sale cash registers, barcode scanning, or you can even have something really big like a SCADA system, a supervisory control and data acquisition. SCADA is something for like large plant processes, like heating and ventilating and air conditioning, and it could be like in power plants, it could be at airports, it could be at waste treatment plants. So you can have like big automated systems that are also collecting data about the system. It could be on the manufacturing floor. So it's not just individual people inputting data or taking customer information on the phone. It could be automated or semi-automated. And this data entry can be collected and then just put in huge batch processes at night. And so you want to be looking at what is all the data coming in from, and what is all the data entry? Is it automated in individuals? And look at it and see if anyone's checking to make sure this data is actually correct. You have a variety of different IT administrators. Now, in a smaller organization, one person might wear all hats, or there might be like two people. But in a larger organization, you'll have someone managing the servers and the systems. You'll have someone or someone's managing just security. Someone or someone's just managing the database. And the database administrator determines who has access to the database and makes sure that the database management system is running properly. And you'll have a network person or persons as well. You'll also have quality assurance. And in quality assurance, we're just trying to make sure that at every stage that things are as they should be, so that we know that we don't get way down the line here and, oh, there's a problem, but that at every stage there's like a gateway here so that we know that we can keep on going and that all functions are functioning properly, and then we're not going to discover way down the line that there's something wrong. You'll also, when we talk about quality assurance, you're going to want to look at the responsibilities and who's managing it. So IS quality assurance responsibilities will, let's maintain our department standards. Let's support development of applications or systems. Let's make sure that the data that is being processed retains its integrity, remains accurate. And let's continue to develop and deliver quality assurance standards and procedures and training. Now, In a larger organization, you'll see a very common role. It's typically an entry-level type role called the systems analyst. Sometimes they're called business analysts, sometimes they're called business systems analysts, so you might, but it's usually something analyst. These are the folks, they are not necessarily super technical, like they're not programmers or application developers, but they're the link between the users and what they need and the developers. So if you work in software development lifecycle, system development lifecycle like I have and like I do, you have people who work with the end users who try to understand what is it the end user really needs. And then these people, these analysts, they understand enough of the process and the system development to articulate this in a way that is very clear so that the actual programmer, the developer, the app developer, can just implement that. And so this is the go-between between the end user and the folks who are developing applications. Because large organizations so often develop their own applications because you can't just go and buy off the shelf what you need. So you've got in-house development. So when we are looking at system analysts, we need to see these are the folks who are researching and planning and designing at a high level systems and software. And they're preparing these high level documents so that the programmers can understand exactly what they need to prepare. And also they're working with the users to make sure the users are satisfied and even setting up user training. The security architect is someone who is responsible for designing all of the security. And so we're planning it, we're designing it, we're creating it, we're evaluating all of our security systems, we're developing a security policy, we're applying the requirements, and the security architect will work with the IS auditor to incorporate. If the auditor says, oh, you know, did you look at this, maybe you missed that, then the architect can incorporate that feedback into the plans. Obviously, the security architect and the auditor should never be the same person. They should be completely independent of each other. And the reason why you don't audit your own stuff except just in the beginning, because it's just like you don't proofread your own writing because you'll miss something that you're so used to, you just glaze over it and don't even see it. Then you have the application developer. Like I said, most large organizations develop their own applications. Or maybe it's not to be used in-house per se, but it's a product that's going to be sold. And so if it's an in-house thing, you're probably working with the business analysts or the BSAs, BAs, SAs, whatever you want to call them, to understand what it is the end users need. And now the app developers are actually writing the code to develop whatever this application is. The infrastructure person, the infrastructure developer, is the person who's going to be responsible for setting up desktops, hardware, networking, make sure that operating systems are installed. And so they're not developing applications, but they're putting together systems and making sure that all of the IT infrastructure is functioning, from desktops to communications. Something that's really super critical that the IS auditor needs to be aware of and be looking for is something called separation of duties or segregation of duties. The bottom line of segregation of duties is you do not want one person who has the opportunity, who has enough different roles that they play, to give them the opportunity to perpetrate misconduct, irregularities, something, and the ability to hide it as well. There have to be enough separations so that it takes collusion. It takes like 2 or 3 people working together to perpetrate something like this. So for example, I'm not a developer and an auditor. I'm not a developer and a tester. I'm not a, I don't back up and restore. I don't have the ability to sign a check and determine when it's okay to even issue a check. I don't decide when to buy and what to buy at the same time without someone else reviewing it. So there's always got to be some interjection of somebody else so that I can't deliberately do things and hide and conceal them. That's the whole idea behind segregation, separation of duties. We don't want one individual to have too much power or responsibility so that they can perpetrate fraud or misconduct or irregularities of any kind. So when we talk about segregation of duties, we're looking at who has the authority to authorize different tasks, who manages transactions and records them, who controls the assets or the resources or has custody of whatever. So these are the things that we want to be looking at, making sure that they're segregated. Different mechanisms. So we want to make sure that if you're going to do a transaction, it's got to be authorized by someone else. If you're going to have custody of assets, you can't use them. Somebody else uses them and you just simply take care of them. If you have access to data, maybe you can write but you can't read, or vice versa. Or maybe you can read and write but you can't delete, or it takes a supervisor to override something. In order to sort of compensate for this, we have a concept called compensating controls. Compensating controls just make sure that we interject somebody else in there. We have audit trails. We have independent reconciliation of records and independent verification. We have exception reports. We have transaction logs. We have supervisory review. We have forced vacations. We have rotation of job duties. We have separation of job duties. All these things to make sure there's no opportunity for fraud or for people to hide irregularities. So when we're evaluating the IT organizational structure, IS Auditor, you need to review the org chart and the job descriptions, identify key roles and responsibilities. Are people actually doing what they're supposed to do? Look at the key functions on the job. Make sure that the job description and the structures are adequate. Or are you missing something? Hey, who's doing this? Nobody's doing this. Look for those kinds of gaps and holes. And verify that there is proper segregation of duties and controls are applied within the IT department. The next thing we're going to talk about is IT strategy.